just like to formally welcome you to our Practice News, our first Practice News webinar for 2022. A packed agenda ahead. And Chris, if you can click ahead to the next actual slide here, if possible. I think you have it there. And just to give you a quick run through, firstly, of what are the items we're going to cover here this morning. Now, as I said, we actually do have our news items as ever, taking them from our most recent edition of Practice Matters, which was just issued on Tuesday by email. First thing here is the new audit quality management standards. Anybody involved in audit, I'm sure you've heard of these over the last few months. You mightn't know much about them, and I'm just going to give you a quick overview and tell you your first steps of work that you will need to do to ensure that you're going to be compliant down the line. The next thing as well, I'm sure many of you here in the Republic of Ireland will have heard of this as well, the Scarp, the Small Company Administrative Rescue Process. It's a vital new tool for viable small and micro companies that need assistance or are in financial troubles, but perhaps couldn't afford examinership. We're going to go into a little bit more detail on that, but also as well highlight to you a webinar that's coming up that is going to go into the practicalities next Thursday, and Cornwall will be on that. Next thing as well is the new UK and Irish financial reporting standards. This is one that nearly snuck under the radar from what I saw as well. New FRS 101 to 105 issued by the FRC just last Monday. I'm going to tell you what has really changed and give you a quick overview on that to spare you the work in doing it. The next thing here is with relation to our new practice consulting web pages. Cornwall and the team, Michael and Bernie in Practice Consulting, over recent weeks, they put a lot of effort and work into updating and making more user-friendly our actual Practice Consulting web pages. Cornwall's going to tell us a little bit more about how he hopes they'll help you, and also invite your feedback. Of course, delighted to be joined here by Crona for her actual tax updates, the latest Republic of Ireland tax updates as we begin 2022. Susan Rosney, our colleague and sustainability lead, is going to talk with me about sustainability and what it means for you in small practice. It is something that impacts us all, so I'm delighted and really looking forward to that chat with Susan. And finally, Cornwall and Eamonn are going to discuss the prospects as we look ahead to 2022. There's been so much change even in the first weeks with the lockdown easing on both sides of the border, but also if you're actually thinking of making the big leap and going into practice later this year. We're going to talk about a little more insights. I know Eamonn has been great to actually participate as the example and case study practitioner for a number of years on our Going Into Practice course. So Chris, if you can click ahead again, that's the headlines of what we're doing today. Next thing up is just introduce who we are today. And firstly, I'm delighted to be joined by Crona. Crona, I'm sure many of you are familiar with from her work in the last 4 or 5 years here as public policy lead, tax lead, and Brexit lead as well with the Institute. And I think, Crona, you're on our last show as well, just in December. Moving across the line, I'm delighted to be joined by Eamonn Healy. Eamonn is a partner in and a founder of Leahy O'Riordan Chartered Accountants in Fairview and also in Rathfarnham, I understand. And Eamonn has been about 35 years or so in practice now. He's a tax practitioner, works in insolvency as well. We're delighted for many, many years. He's been a long-standing member of our Members in Practice Committee. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with Eamonn. And I think he has been on maybe pre-shows as well with relation to at the very start of COVID, we had Eamonn on. So Eamonn, great to have you on board. As I mentioned, Susan Rosney and myself are going to have a chat about sustainability. Susan is our public policy officer and sustainability lead here at Chartered Accountants Ireland. Some of you might know her from her previous role as well at Chartered Accountants with relation to our publications. So Susan, you're very welcome. Of course, you know myself and Cornwall hopefully very, very well, working in practice consulting, working with relation to compliance support, everything from going into practice, retiring and selling your practice, but also the training and technical training. And I will tell you a little bit more about our webinars we've upcoming in spring 22 as well. If you click ahead again, who are you this morning? And I'm sure many of you are familiar with this metric. As I said, we have over 460 people. You can see the map there. Every county in the island of Ireland is represented. So delighted to see that great turnout. Mostly, again, we have, as you would expect, we have well in excess of 80% of people that will be people in practice. We have 10% or so people joining us from business as well. So you're very, very welcome, whether you're coming from small, big practice or business. Of course, as well, we would have about 80 to 90% normally coming from the Republic of Ireland, some from Northern Ireland and from overseas. And typically as well, a very sprightly 46 median age. So that's great. If you can click ahead again, Chris, that's just our disclaimer, just given the usual things. And I suppose it's particularly important here with Practice News. We have slides here. They're giving very high level technical updates more than anything on the technical side of things. There is a lot of reading for you to do, and that's why we have all the links on the slides and why we ask you that you make sure you receive them. Sometimes you can print them out, but have the PDF version with the links. So don't rely on anything that you think you heard Conal, Eamonn, Jeremy, Crona say. Always go to source materials, and that's basically what the slide is saying. If you can click ahead again. Yeah, so I'm going to kick off with our actual practice updates for this morning. And as I say, this is our normal actual news item where we have 3 or 4 news items that we've actually taken from the most recent issue of Practice Matters. This was actually sent out by email just last Tuesday morning. So if you have actually signed up to the Practice Consulting emails in your My Account section of the Institute webpage, you'll be getting this actual issue. We used to send it in paper up until about a year, 18 months ago, but now it's all online. And again, it's a PDF, so you can print it out very, very easily, 7-page document. And if you didn't get it or haven't had a chance to read it yet, you can download it here at that link there to our actual Practice Consulting page on the website, and you can get the past issues as well. Click ahead again, Chris, that would be great. First point I want to talk to you is about audit quality management. And I'm sure for many of you that maybe have even joined us on our auditing courses pre-Christmas back in December, you'll know we've given a little bit of an outline of what's been coming up here with relation to the new UK and Irish our quality management standards for audit and insurance engagements. Just to give you the latest news here, just before Christmas, it could have snuck under the radar for you, the IASA issued revised quality management standards for firms' responsibilities to design, implement and operate a system quality management for the Republic of Ireland. And there's 3 things basically in this. The first and the biggest document here is looking at a whole firm basis. It's called the International Standard on Quality Management ISQCM Ireland 1. And that's looking, as I say, at a whole firm basis on your audit work, assurance work related services. Also as well, there's a second document, smaller document, looking at what work you do here on engagement quality reviews. And there's a third related one, ISA 220, obviously looking at individual assignments and at engagement level on the quality management on the audited set of financial statements. That is all good. That's what IASA released. And IASA would have followed on from what came out from the Financial Reporting Council for the UK equivalent, which was issued just in actually July of 2021. So you can see big change here. Next slide, if you can click on, Chris, is just to tell you, I suppose, what at a very high level has changed here. And at the very high level, this first point is this new quality management standards. They've introduced a new approach, which is more focused on being more proactive as a firm to identify and respond to your audit quality risks. Now, as I said, the ISQC1, the biggest document here, is looking at the whole firm level, and it wants you to tailor your approach to quality management going forward, to customize the design, implementation and operation of a system of quality management based on the individual circumstances that face your actual practice and the clients you have as well. And it gets into such details as the monitoring activities you do around audit quality management, and also such things as root cause analysis. I'm sure many of you that might have been through in recent years a monitoring visit on the audit side from professional standards will be familiar with that. So that's very, very important. And again, the new approach, it's going to be a lot more proactive, but also forward looking. And so basically here, they expect that this new approach is going to be a lot more changes and iterative approach and evolving as the years go on. So the bad news, I suppose, here is if you're a practice who has previously been using the ISQC1, maybe using a template such as our own PQA template in this area from the Institute, and pretty much putting your name to it, but not maybe thinking and putting much detail or looking to update it very often, this is going to be an approach where you're going to have to put in a little bit more work, and you're going to have to prepare for the implementation in 2022, but keep working on it going forward as well to ensure that your audit quality work you do fits your practice and is fit for purpose for what you're doing. Now, the next thing here, that's the bad news. What are the next steps that I would actually recommend for you to actually do? And Chris, if you can click ahead again. The next steps here, and I know it might be, I suppose, a little bit of a shock here to some of you. The next steps I would say to you here is just to read the standards. We've given you the links in the slide just before last. So just to download them and read them and familiarize yourself. That'd be the first thing I'd say to you in the next month or two to actually do. The IAASB has also published 2 first-time guides for ISQCM 1 and 2. And what I'd say to you here as well is to basically download those. There's a lot of good supports there. and the Institute, be it actually in our technical audit courses coming up, in our technical guidance documents for our professional accounting team, and also in our PQAs. We're going to be putting out guidance and assistance to you over the coming weeks and months as well. So you're not on your own in this regard. And just to say to you, what's the effective date for this new work to come into place? It is going to be for financial reporting periods on or after 15 December 22. So what I'd say to you is, yeah, there's a bit of time to work in this, but there's also a bit of work to put in. So don't leave it last minute. Begin to familiarize yourself with the requirements, come to courses and get yourself up to speed. Don't leave it until the very busy autumn period. So that's what I'm saying to you here. We're giving you a heads up on it. That's the first thing. If we can click ahead again, the next the point of audit I want to remind you about relates to actually this time of year and audit registration and the single jurisdiction audit registration option that is available from a professional standards team. So if you're actually looking ahead to 22 and you actually are both still at present audit registered to complete audits in both jurisdictions, the Republic of Ireland and in the UK, but if you don't actually happen to complete audits in the opposite jurisdiction, you should really think about whether, and if you don't have plans to do into the future as well, whether you want to maintain your audit registration in that second jurisdiction. There is going to be diverging audit requirements. You've heard us talk about these previously on the course, and particularly for the Republic of Ireland. And I know I've spoken a couple of times with relation to IAS's new CPD requirements that have come in for 2022 and are going to be expect the Institute to check on these going forward. So really think about it if you're actually want to reduce your regulatory burden going forward and you want to take up this actual single jurisdiction audit registration option, do contact our audit registration team. The next thing here is, if you can click ahead again, relates to insolvency. And basically here on insolvency, if you can just click ahead again, Chris, we have a couple of updates. The first one is with relation to Scarp. I'm sure many of you have actually heard of Scarp, the new law that came in and the new actual process that came in to help small and micro companies in financial difficulties was brought into place, I think, about the middle of last year, but formally came into effect and into law just last early December. Again, it is, and it promises, as I say, a way to help small companies who wouldn't perhaps be able to afford the examinership process going forward. I think actually, and Chris and Conal, you might correct me on this, or you'll definitely outline, I'm sure, in the webinar going forward. There has been one or two already, even since actually taken place, and helps companies since actually December. But if you want to learn a little bit more about this, our Institute colleagues, the professional accounting team, Dee Moran and Lillian Halpel, as well as Conal, are going to do a free webinar on next Thursday morning, the 10th. They're joining with David Swinburne and with Sinead McNamara of Fitzgerald Legal in Cork. And really, I think it's a great webinar to catch up on Scarp. So I'd recommend, if you can, to actually to do catch the webinar. I think it'll be recorded as well, and you can learn more about it at the link there. If you can go ahead again, Chris, and actually give me the next slide. And these are just really just to tell you, there's been some, if you are involved in insolvency, you might be aware of this, you might not. Obviously, the CCABI has been updating its Irish SIPs, Statements of Insolvency Practice. And in December, it's updated 7B, 8B, 10B, and 11B. You can learn more about the updated ones and get all the other ones at the link above, as well as the Northern Irish and UK and British equivalents as well. Also as well, there's been a new technical alert that has come out just at December, issued by the Institute through CCABI. And this is to help insolvency practitioners with relation to their RBO requirements. Obviously, an insolvency practitioner, be it examinership, receivership, liquidation, whatever it will be, you have very unique requirements with relation to the RBO and the ownership and the role you play in the company. So this goes through some of your obligations and the practicalities. So please do download it if you're involved in that area of business. If you can go ahead again, Chris, the next one here, my final news item here to remind you before I hand over to Conal, is in relation to the updated accounting standards. As I said, just issued last Monday. And Chris, if you can click ahead again, I looked at them and I said, wasn't sure what exactly these were now. Were they big changes? Were they small changes? And basically the good news is here, and you can get the new standards at the link above, the blue link in the first thing, is that they're actually basically just a compendium of all the changes that happened since the last FRS 101 to 105 has come out in 2018. Just combining it all together, you know, there's always new updates, for instance, for the rent concessions that came out in 2020, 2021, maybe also changes for audit and so on as well, and for the EU, for the UK, of course, leaving Europe, and also some updates as well with relation to Irish company law, The FRSs are not developed with Irish company law in mind as they're first taught, so just to tie them in. So that's the work that's been done here. It isn't the big changes I was talking about previously that are coming from the periodic review. That's still ongoing for FRS 100 to 105. There will be a public consultation period, I think, on what's coming out of it later this year, and we will have new standards again, 100 to 105, coming out later in 2022, and they will have more substantial changes in them. So just to be aware of these new standards, but that there's more changed ones coming out as well later in the year. And of course, we'll keep you appraised of that here in Practice Consulting. That's that, Conal. I've done my thing here. Hopefully you're back in action and can hear us. I think you have a little bit to tell us in the next slide about the updates to the web pages that Michael, you and Bernie have done.
Absolutely, Chris. Thank you very much for moving that on. Yes, Jeremy, I had a remarkable IT experience this morning just before I came on. My computer knocked itself off, and when it came back on again, date was set to 2080. So I was living in the future. All my software licenses had expired, and I couldn't get into anything. It was some really interesting stuff happened between now and 2080, but I'll fill you in on that later on. Anyway, in the meantime, what we really did over the past month or so is we have updated and changed and revamped the members in practice pages of our website. Now, a lot of things on the Institute's website have sort of developed over time, and it tends to be content put there by the teams who developed the content. So if you are coming as a user, it can sometimes be quite difficult to find what you need. So what we did was we said, look, if somebody's coming to our website as a member in practice, what are the key things that they want to see? What are the key tabs that they need to use? And these were the 8 key tabs that we landed on. Going to practice, managing your practice, practice compliance, toolkits and resources, a lot of the free stuff that we have there, and also some of the stuff that we charge for. Audit. Look, there's so much in audit that we gave it a page by itself. Other client services, practice consulting services ourselves, but what can we do for you and what's new? So you can look quickly to see what's new, the latest version of Practice Matters and so forth. So Chris, if you just move on the slide there, one, if you could, please. So that's what we've done. We've put your needs front and center, and we've thought about things like, what's your practice journey? I mean, you obviously have to go into practice, so there's a tab on going into practice with all the resources that you need there. You then need to manage it compliantly, so we've got a tab on practice compliance, and there's going to be a bit of overlap between the two of them, so you might find the same thing on both pages. That's fine, I think, but once again, we're thinking about it from your point of view. So if you just move on one more slide, Chris, there, I'll just show you, for example, from an audit point of view. If you're auditing, there are certain things that you need to have. You need to become a registered auditor in the first place. So if that's obvious where to go to find the resources to do that. You need your audit qualification. That's a separate matter. That's separate to the firm getting audit registration. This is you as an individual getting audit qualification. So how do you go about doing that? You got to have both of those things in place. The standards and guidance, where are they? And then, the obvious stuff we think, where do I find the latest copy of the auditor's report? I mean, that could have been hard to find in the past, but we're saying, look, if you're auditing, these are sort of the key things, where to find an engagement letter, stuff like that. And if you're ceasing as an auditor in an individual company, where's that? Now, look, this is a work in progress. We're going to add to this as we go along. Those were 10 key things. I think there's 10 more we could add very, very quickly to that list, and maybe then start to categorize them a bit more. But this is where we're going with this thing. So I think what I'd ask people to do is have a look around. I know Eamonn has looked at it already and gave us a couple of pointers as to some tweaks that we could make to it. So thanks very much, Eamonn, for that. But by all means, any user, if you want to send an email to myself or Jeremy saying, look, this is how we think, these are things that we'd expect to find here, and if you could put that there, that'll be easy to find in future. So that's for example, the guidance of completion or annual return, for example, that's something that you've got to do every year. So if we put that into the practice compliance section, that would certainly be helpful to people. So we're just trying to draw it all together. So that's what we've done. So I'd say, have a look around and see what you think. So now I'll just hand back to yourself, Jeremy. Now.
Indeed, Conal, thank you very, very much for that. As I say to you, it's a big body of work, and as you say as well, very useful, but also it's going to keep evolving, and we definitely do welcome your insights. So please do take a chance to take a look at it at some stage in the coming weeks. Yeah, just actually before we move on, and Chris, you can actually put up the next slide there to our RI tax updates. Just make a brief announcement. Nora Collender has actually left the Institute just in recent weeks to take up a new external role. Now, I'd just like formally, and I'm sure Conal, Crona, and all the rest of the team as well, just to thank Nora for all her work with us. It's been a pleasure to work with her here, particularly in practice news over the last couple of years, but also prior to that as well. She's been always a great help to everyone here in the Institute with relation to tax queries and just her general assistance. But also as well, I'm sure many of you are here on the call here that Nora has helped you over the years with different tax queries, dealing with revenue and so on as well. So I'm sure you will actually just like to thank Nora for that. But also, as well as we look ahead, just like to wish her every success in the next actual step of her career. On that note then, just moving on, I'm delighted to be joining here as well by Crona this morning. Now, Crona, as I said earlier, you'll be familiar with, has worked with very closely with Nora over recent years as a tax lead, but also in relation to public policy like Brexit and so on as well. So with Crona, we're in very, very safe hands going forward with relation to the tax work. So Crona, I'd like to welcome you here. I know you have a very detailed update for us. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeremy, and good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. So, look, I suppose I've about 15 minutes to take you through some of the tax developments. I know some of them will be spillovers from last year, and others are new issues. So, I suppose just to start, I suppose, what 2022 in context. So, at the moment in the Republic of Ireland, we are just working closely with Revenue to set up the TALC meetings for the year. So, there's about 35 meetings, formal meetings that take place across all the various tax heads. It's a co-joined body of Chartered Accountants, there's CCABI, Irish Tax Institute, Law Society, and Revenue. So there's a huge amount of lobbying work going on and will continue for 2022. So just to say that process is underway. So some of the issues that I'm going to highlight today are works in progress. I suppose, I suppose I can only restart the session by looking at COVID supports. And I know a lot of the COVID supports are beginning to wind down. So I want to just highlight a couple of things that probably should be on your radar, particularly in relation to the EPSWT. So there were some changes made. There were a couple of changes made since the start of the year, namely for affected businesses by, I suppose, the pandemic measures that were brought in between the 20th of December and mid-January. For those particular businesses, there's actually an enhanced rate of EPSWT available for the month of February. And the expected step down in subsidy rates is now being delayed by 1 month. So basically what that means is those particular businesses will continue to receive support until the 31st of May. So Revenue actually updated their guidance yesterday to show how those enhanced subsidy rates can be claimed for, but also to highlight that some employers may have already submitted eligible payroll submissions for February 22, and they might have already received a subsidy payment calculated at the reduced rate. So if you're in that bracket, what Revenue are asking you to do is to resubmit those relevant pay slips and include a marker. It's EPSWT PHR marker, and Revenue have confirmed that once corrections are received from employers, it'll recalculate the subsidy due, having regard to the enhanced rates, and pay that balance due shortly afterwards. So there is updated guidance on the website. It was issued, as I said, yesterday, so it's well worth a read. There also is some tables, useful tables in terms of the current subsidy rates as well. Just one thing on the EPSWT, it has been brought to our attention. Some practitioners are, this is a situation where Revenue have raised queries about EPSWT claims, and there's a requirement on the practitioner, the agent, or the employer to turn around a response to that query within 7 days. But then the practitioner or employer is left waiting for Revenue to come back with their decision. So generally these are cases where there's a bit of a disagreement about whether EPSWT was entitled. Some employers have actually deregistered from EPSWT, so they're kind of sitting in limbo. So just to say that we have fed that back into Revenue and we await a response. Just, I suppose, to remind you on the EPSWT, obviously no new employers can enter the scheme from the 1st of January, and to reflect that, and you can no longer register, obviously, on Ross for EPSWT. And again, if you, in the guidance as well, it just gives you some steps as to how to deregister from EWSS, and that's all done through My Inquiry. So the guidance is quite comprehensive on that. And just to, I suppose, an extension of that, Budget 2022 did announce that the full rate of employers' PRSI will be reinstated from the 1st of March 2022, and that is still taking place, and it has been legislated already for. So that's just to expect that from the 1st of March 2022. Just a couple of other small things on the COVID supports. The tax debt warehousing scheme, that's also been extended by 1 month to the 30th of April. And really what that is to include is really to facilitate, I suppose, the 2 monthly VAT return for March, April. Now, we are also aware that there's a certain frustration among practitioners or agents that they're spending a lot of time trying to figure out what debts are warehoused, that the information coming from Revenue isn't that clear. So we have brought that to Revenue's attention as well. And the very last thing I'll say about COVID is there was a concession that Revenue had been given for corporation tax purposes. So this was where an employee or a director might have been restricted from travel between tax jurisdictions because of COVID-19. So they may have had an unavoidable extended stay in Ireland, or they may not have been able to get back to another tax jurisdiction. So Revenue had been disregarding those presences for corporation tax purposes, and they had intended to withdraw that from the 31st of January 2022, subject to a review. Just to confirm that practice has been withdrawn, so there was no extension of that deadline. So just to note that there's an e-brief on Revenue's website just clarifying that. So that's the main updates on the COVID side. Just some other issues that might be relevant to you that are just on Revenue's radar at the moment. Obviously, this isn't a comprehensive list because there's just so much going on. But you might have seen yesterday that Revenue announced that they're going to defer the implementation of the findings of the review of the flat rate expenses regime until next year, so until the 1st of January 2023. So this has been, I suppose, spoken about over the last few years as to whether the flat rate expense regime should be removed, or should it be reviewed, or should it be reduced. Revenue have been in contact with the Minister for Finance on all of this, and I think the conclusion that has arrived at is, I suppose, look, we have been in unprecedented times, and given all that's gone on, I think the Revenue has made the decision, and they've informed Pascal Donoghue that they will defer the review until, or the implementation of any findings until the 1st of January. So there is lots of correspondence on that on the Revenue website, and they issued a press release on that yesterday. I suppose just getting into a little bit more the nitty gritty, one issue that's been brought to our attention, and we've contacted Revenue on it. If you're an agent and you're doing payroll for your clients, so I'm talking about situations where you're doing more than one payroll. So you could be filing 50 payrolls for 50 different clients. And in the agent's inbox, when you make a payment for that payroll, it's very difficult to see and link what payroll payment you've made for what employer. So we've asked Revenue, would there be a chance of actually referencing within the agent's ROS inbox the name of the client or employer, the PAYE liability, the amount paid, what period, etc., rather than the agent having to go into each individual client's inbox and trace the payments by payment references. It's just been a little bit messy. A few people have brought it to our attention. So I spoke to Revenue last week on that, and they are looking in to see what they can do. So and obviously we'll keep members updated via tax news. The other issue, and I know Nora would have mentioned it at the last practice news, is this whole EPSWT, so the Professional Services Withholding Tax regime. The CCABI did make a submission in September on solutions that were needed, I suppose, to deal with the issues arising with the allocation of the credit in the context of doctors' practices. So this is a situation whereby a doctor within a practice who's not necessarily the proprietor treats a patient, and then a payment comes in from the HSC, but the credit for that payment is allocated to the individual doctor and not the practice. So it is a big problem. Now Now, the CCABI did put forward certain solutions for that to get around it. We last met with them on the 25th of November. They said they weren't in a position to respond. We do have a meeting scheduled for the last week of February, so we will update you as to whether there's any update on that. We have had a few members contact us to see if there's any update. Revenue's reasoning for having no update was that they just have insufficient time to carry out an analysis. So we will follow that up with them in 3 weeks' time. The other big area of change that's coming down the tracks, I suppose, for practitioners is the new code of practice for revenue audits. That is due to issue on the 1st of May. Sorry, when I say issue, it's to actually come into practice from the 1st of May. It's going to be issued in the next few weeks. We've actually got a meeting with Revenue today on that. Now, we would have concerns about the 1st of May deadline. We feel it's a little bit tight, given that the code isn't actually finalised yet. You know, it's a lot to expect agents and revenue officials to be fully trained and fully briefed on the changes, because the changes to the code are quite dramatic. So essentially, in a nutshell, and I've had more time to go into more detail, but really what's happening with the code is that it's removing aspect queries, and essentially the compliance interventions have been replaced by these level 1, 2, and 3 compliance interventions is what they're called. So level 1 essentially is a self-review or a profile interview, and you still have the opportunity to make an unprompted disclosure. Level 2 is obviously a little bit more serious, it's a risk review or an audit. So there's a distinction between a risk review or an audit, and a prompted disclosure is still available there. And level 3 is an investigation where there's no qualifying disclosure available. So we've been back and forth with Revenue for the last few months on this, to ensure that the code is as, I suppose, user friendly, and as you know, we would have had a concern that the risk reviews, if they're going to replace aspect queries, I mean, the level of aspect queries that Revenue issue, I think they issued 70,000 in 2020. So we don't want to see essentially 70,000 additional audits taking place. So we've had all those discussions with Revenue, and we're very keen that it's issued and put into practice at a time when practitioners and agents, revenue officials are ready. And so we will report back on that. Just a couple of small things, just one last thing. We have had confirmation from Revenue. So this is to do with the idea where Ross Mail notification is received in your inbox. And we've had ongoing discussions, I suppose, at Tal Collection, whether it would be possible to add a TAIN reference to the subject line of emails sent from Revenue via Ross to agents and advisors. So the feedback from agents has been that multiple TAINs, that have multiple TAINs, that they're not sure what agent certificate to log in with to check for the correspondence when the Ross notification message arrives. So Revenue have confirmed that they will now include the TAIN reference in the subject line of the email that's sent, and the go live date for that is the 15th of February. So we have, liaised with a few members on this, and they feel this is a very positive development. So hopefully it will help in terms of dealing with correspondence from Revenue. There will be an update to the Ross TDM, and the usual brief and all that will go out, and we will obviously update members when that is. But the go live date Revenue confirmed yesterday is the 15th of February. And very last thing, there's a few public consultations on the go at the moment. We are responding to the country by country one and the territorial system of taxation, so they're due in the next few weeks. But one response we did make 2 weeks ago was to the Commission on Taxation and Welfare. So this was a consultation called Your Vision, Our Future, and what they were looking for was, I suppose, solutions to tax difficulties being experienced. And so we did submit something, and just very broadly, just to give you a flavour of the sort of things that we represented the membership on, obviously following consultation with our various committees. We want to, I suppose, ensure Ireland's personal tax system remains competitive while bolstering the take-home pay of workers. Like, we are conscious that the tax rates are high, and what that looks like from an Ireland Inc. perspective. So we did suggest making some review or changes to the personal tax system to ensure that, especially given the cost of living and etc. We also looked at, we asked that the PRSI burden is not increased on employers. We feel employers are paying enough PRSI. We looked to maybe increase the CAT group thresholds, because I suppose property prices, asset values are all going up. The thresholds have essentially remained stagnant over the last few years. We asked that tax relief for pension contributions would stay the same. We're very keen that the 40% rate is maintained. And also, I suppose, in terms of capital tax release for Irish entrepreneurs, we just highlighted the importance of those for that particular cohort. Then I suppose we did look at the tax treatment of service companies, some measures to enhance supply of affordable housing, and there was also proposals to use the tax system to accelerate business commitments to net zero targets. So I know Susan's going to talk a lot more about these net zero targets, but just to say that from the tax side, we are looking at that as well. So I think, Jeremy, I hope I haven't run over time, but that's
no, you have been bang on the 15 minutes.
Okay.
I might say, so well timed and a very comprehensive update there. As ever, there's a few questions coming in there for you. I think some you might be able to get back very quick answers to on the chat, on the Q&A. Others, you probably will have to get back to people one-on-one and have a chat with them on this one, as I say to you, and you just won't have the answer to hand this morning. So I'm going to leave you there. I'm going to thank you for the very comprehensive update and leave you there for 10 or 15 minutes. And we will have a Q&A at the very end as well. So if there's a point that you want to raise that will be relevant for the general audience, at about 11:15, we'll have a Q&A again. We might run a few minutes over, who is to know, so do stick with us even at that stage, but we'll try to be done by 11:20. So thanks again, Crona. And that leads us actually very nicely into our next piece. And Chris, if you can click to the next slide here, I'm delighted to be joined this morning by my colleague, our Institute Sustainability Lead and Public Policy Officer, Susan Rosny. And Susan, like myself, you've probably got your Institute banner I see behind you as well. And Susan and myself would often in the last year or two be talking about different sustainability issues. So I decided to invite on Susan this morning, and I know she has written an article as well. I think it was in the October 2021 edition of Practice Matters on sustainability and small practice. So I decided it would be great to actually come on board this morning and just talk about sustainability and how it's going to impact going forward the small and medium-sized practitioner. And I suppose the first thing to say, you're very, very welcome, Susan, but the first thing to say is, I suppose as a general introduction, we all hear a lot, particularly in recent months with COP26, about different things about the word sustainability. We hear other terms as well, such as ESG and different things like that. Now, I have to admit, I'm no expert in this area, and I'm sure many of the listeners here this morning as well, they need to improve their knowledge in it. I suppose a very basic question first, what do these terms mean, and how do they particularly relate to generally to the world, but to us as well? So over to you, Susan.
Absolutely. And Jeremy, thank you very much. It's great to be here today. Absolutely, these terms are very often a sticking point for people, and the first slide I have today is actually to define these terms about what is sustainability and what is ESG. So I'm going to ask my colleague Chris if he could move to the next slide there, and apologies for, I've already apologized to Chris for my animations that I have in there, but the first one there, Chris, if you wanted to click on is what is sustainability. It's an extremely broad term. So if you click there next, you'll see that sustainability, it's the survival of everything. And it's the Brundtland Commission definition from 1987 was that it's meeting the needs of the future without compromising, meeting the future current needs without compromising future generations to meet their needs. Very, very broad. So if you click on them, the next definition there is ESG. And if you click through to the next ones, this is the one you really need to remember. This is how the finance community talk about sustainability. Pretty much since 2005, this is how certainly the investor community have parsed sustainability into something that is a bit more manageable. So if you click on there, Chris, you'll see that ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. And the next two clicks will bring you to the end of this slide. It's very much the triple bottom line of people, profit, and planet. And crucially, it's what investors talk about. It's what financiers talk about when they talk about sustainability. There's a concept called double materiality, and that's as simple as how your business impacts on the environment and society, and how the environment, climate, and social pressures impact on your business. And that's essentially what it is. And governance wraps around all of that. So if we move to the next slide, Chris, I want to talk about how ESG is entering the world of the small and medium practitioner, and how it's entering is very much as a risk and as an opportunity. And this presentation is to look towards the horizon and to help practitioners maybe get out ahead of what questions on ESG that their clients will be posing to them. And just very quickly, the concept of risk with this, it's really divided into two aspects. You've got physical risk and a transitional risk. And the physical risks are the acute risks like floods, where something sudden will happen, maybe a flood, it could be a labour strike, and the chronic risks. So the chronic risk is more the rising temperatures, which are causing sea levels to rise with attendant issues. The transitional risks are more about the risks associated with an economy like ours transitioning to net zero. And Crona mentioned at the end of her presentation there about how you're seeing more carbon taxes now. You're seeing taxes that are to push the country towards meeting very ambitious net zero goals. And net zero basically is when we're removing more carbon out of the environment than we're putting in. So I can go into that in a bit more detail, but essentially all you really have to remember for this is that you've got various risks associated with the ESG, and you've got physical and transitional. So if you move on to the next slide, Chris, I just want to show what one of these physical risks is looking like, and this is climate. So what this is, if you keep clicking, Chris, that would be great. This is a particular piece of technology that shows what the sea level rises are going to cause for various cities. And you've got Galway, Limerick, Dublin and Cork. I was particularly struck by Limerick because that's where I'm from. And I just noticed how much the Shannon is kind of breaching the banks and going quite far inland. So you can see there anybody who has an investment in that area, anyone who has a business. Of course, I went in to see, where's my parents at? But anybody who's in that area is going to be quite severely affected by those. And there'll be a lot of adaptation that will need to be done so people can work around this risk that's coming. Now, what struck me as well is that I initially looked at the 2050 forecast, but then I brought it back to 2030. So if you click on, Chris, you'll see that this is the 2030 picture. So that's only in 8 years' time. So you'd need to work out what would need to be done if you have people who are kind of in these areas, especially I'm looking at Limerick there, but also in Cork, also in Galway, and indeed in Dublin. And I was interested to note earlier, Jeremy, that you said there's people from all over the country at this event. So you can see that this is impacting and is coming sooner than we had expected. So when I talked, sorry, Jeremy, you'll have to.
No, I was just I was agreeing with you as I say to you. Yes, I'm sure we have. Hopefully, haven't frightened the people from Limerick here too much now. But it's something they need to know. But I'm really, as I say, when we see all these maps, and we sometimes say that they're 30 years in advance. But this one here is truly shocking of the potential risk just less than a decade in advance.
Less than a decade, absolutely. So, I mean, it's not all bad, but certainly this one is certainly one to watch. But we've been used to flooding, I suppose, in Ireland. You know, we've had flooding for quite a couple of years. But what's interesting is that I spoke to somebody who talked about it's not just flooding, it's also the heat that's coming. So we're used to quite hot winters. That impacts on agriculture as an obvious example. So there's many there's I've only given, say, one risk there, but there's other risks associated with climate that will impact in many, many different ways. Right. And it's that time span as well that we need to look at. And everybody is looking at
those pictures really bring it home to us. And as I say, on the next slide, I know as well, obviously the global context we all know is in a dire situation. We all need to do work. But as I say, as well, I sometimes find it, I suppose, difficult to say, what can we as accountants and as members do? And you've set up a very good slide here, and I know you're going to talk to us about really what as members we can do to help our clients, but also how to become more, I suppose, sustainable in how we work.
For sure. Yeah, the next slide there, Chris, is kind of more about the risk profile. But I might go through this very, very quickly and then move on to the more positive aspects, because really one of the big risks is how much do we all know about this? And I think practitioners, obviously with extremely busy practices, have so much else to be thinking about. So it's quite difficult to suddenly pivot into something where all of us are very, or none of us are entirely up to speed on it, which is why we've done a lot of work in, say, the second part of that slide and demystifying this for accountants. And you'll find in some of the resources that have been linked to on this presentation that we've got resources on how to come to come to a better understanding of some of the climate terminology, and demystifying some of the concepts around even just the terms you mentioned earlier, ESG, also keeping track of the constant development in this area. So that's another burden maybe on practitioners, where they're having to kind of keep up to date with the standards that are changing, the regulations that are coming. We mentioned tax, there's more regulations on the way, and the different stakeholder requirements that will impact on them, from clients and investors, particularly banks, supply chain partners. And that will change your risk profile depending on what sector you or your client are going to be in. So for instance, depending on what size company the company is, or what sector they're operating in, say the agri-food business is going to have a different risk profile to somebody who's working in financial services. But there will be, say, behavioral kind of cultural issues that will have to be looked at to examine how you're going to impact on the environment and how it's going to impact on you. So a culture maybe of looking at these risks in a way that's embedding them throughout the organization, rather than kind of as traditionally would have been put into a different section of the company to look at. Other risks will include competition risk of other people getting there faster, maybe financial risk, accessing capital, and reputational is an obvious one as well. And there's other third-party risks. Each of these will be impacted by ESG.
It's fascinating I actually, sorry, I could have crossed you there. No, it's fascinating to see all this, as I say to you, and to get those, I suppose, to get those insights, because it really goes into all aspects of our life and into business and so on as well. And I know, I suppose, we continue to concentrate on the very worrying, the big picture globally, and what the risks we face as business members. But I suppose it's not, I'm going to say it's not all bad news as well. There's many opportunities, well, I think, for you've identified for SMBs and also for their clients. And I know you've that on the next slide as well.
I do actually, yes, Chris, if you wanted to move on to the next slide, because one of the things that people find very disempowering is to be, first of all, to be blamed for everything, because, you know, everybody, you can look at your own life and see, oh God, I'm impacting so negatively on it. But there are, first of all, many ways in which people can work towards mitigating these effects, and also positively contributing and adapting to them. One of the opportunities for practitioners is advising on tenders. So the Government of Ireland, we know it has quite ambitious climate targets, and it has identified in its climate action plan that it wants the public sector to lead by example. The knock-on effect of this is that it's putting a lot of green procurement guidelines in place, and it wants to work with suppliers who are also going to be working in a more environmentally friendly way, and also more socially conscious way. So the more you know about that, then the more you can advise clients to follow this. The other thing is talent. Everybody is aware of the war for talent. Firms are in a position to maybe improve their what we call the employee value proposition by introducing more ESG friendly operational practices in their own operations. A lot of people are doing this already. Another option is improving access to finance, and I have a section on the Sustainability Hub about some access that people are more sources of finance that are related to sustainability. You'll find that a lot of banks are moving towards this. The banks themselves have signed up to the principles of responsible banking, and they're working with clients on how to link projects and link loans with sustainability as well. Compliance, it's an obvious one, wanting to get out ahead of regulation, complying with regulations. And the regulations are coming, certainly in reporting. And while they right now apply to only 11,000 companies in Europe, they will be applying to 50,000 companies for the financial year 2023. So there's a lot happening there, and there's a lot more coalescing in the kind of global landscape of reporting. So we'll obviously keep members up to date with that. My colleagues in practice, professional accounting work on that. Finally, there's reputation. Reputation, as you know, is everything. A lot of companies are suffering badly from transgressing various ESG, I won't say rules, but certainly guidelines for ESG, and how consumers expect them to behave. And sometimes there's accusations of greenwashing, but really people should be making more of an effort to demonstrate that they do an awful lot of good practice. So the next slide is really the good news slide.
Good.
Sorry, people never want to talk to me about this, so it's sort of doom and gloom, but really there's an awful lot that businesses are doing already. There's a lot that small practices are doing already. I'm always struck because I look after the Climate Champions campaign, and when I talk to people who've signed up to the campaign, they might not have mentioned a lot in their form but about what they do for climate, but when I talk to them one-to-one, I discover that they have done huge amounts in their practices, but they don't necessarily think of it as something that they need to say and to publicize. So what I would advise businesses to do always is look at your business through, or look at your practice rather, through an ESG lens. So what are you doing already that's climate positive? And how do you articulate it? Do you put it on your website? Do you put it in any literature? These aren't big changes that are being asked, and some of them will help you as well. So energy management, effective energy management is a classic one, where you reduce the amount of energy you're using. And obviously nowadays with energy prices being what they are, that makes an awful lot of sense. Switching supplier to a renewable energy supplier. We know that the grid isn't always entirely renewable, and it's only ever going to be 75% renewable for the time being. But still, it is a positive step that you can demonstrate that you're moving away from fossil fuels. Electric vehicles makes a lot of sense now. I know people have a bit of range anxiety still, but the advice very much is just take an EV for a test drive. They're wonderful, and they will save a huge amount on tax, on car tax, VRT. And then obviously most firms are already paperless. Most firms already have very positive employee and benefits. And these are things that are actually part of a very good social profile. And finally, as I would always say to chartered accountants, is that chartered accountants already act in the public interest. They already have their code of ethics, and they already make such an enormous contribution to the economy of Ireland. This is an extension of that. So I think there's huge scope for chartered accountants to be leading in this space, and very successfully.
You've definitely given us lots of foods for thought there, and it's good to see that there is opportunities and good news there as well. And you've been very helpful, I suppose, for me to, I suppose, build up my very basic knowledge, I have to admit, in this area, and I'm sure for many of the listeners as well. But listen, I know you have, and your team as well, you've developed a lot of resources, obviously, to help people to learn a little bit more about this again. I know you have a sustainability hub, and there's lots of different documents and so on that as well. Listen, tell us more.
The Sustainability Hub is available on our Knowledge Centre. Everything is entirely free. We have some resources that I would urge people to look at, like the Sustainability for Accountants Handbook, which is on the top right there. And that really breaks it down for people of steps they can take, very practical, small steps, because that's what this is really all about. And I think it's what we wanted to do with that was to move away from this enormous kind of problem of climate change and really try to pull it down into very specific steps that people can take, even as small as kind of printing on double sides, but very kind of specific. And Climate Essentials for Accountants is something we brought out last year in association with with IFAC, the International Federation of Accountants. And that was really to say, what do these terms mean and how do they apply to accountants? Why do we need to know about this? And that's in, again, very simple language. And also it's linked to a very short course, a 10-minute course that you can take and just kind of check through it. And finally, there's another publication there on navigating the reporting landscape for people interested in that specific one. But the next slide, finally, I'll just show you an example of some of the content there in that sustainability guide, where it gives you a case study and it gives you some very quick tips about various things I mentioned that you can do. And finally, I'd encourage people just have a look at the events that we run on sustainability. Next Wednesday, for instance, there's a kind of 10-minute Q&A with a climate expert where I'm just going to put questions to him about, like, what do these terms mean? What are CO2 emissions? What is carbon budgeting? And there's also other events like with the Leinster Society that'll be taking place about sustainability reporting, which is going to be very good. So there's an awful lot of events coming up. But I think what we're doing in the team is really trying to focus on what do accountants need to know and how to make this digestible and understandable. So it's not this enormous learning curve in what's essentially been quite a scientific kind of area. It's really trying to pull it into the experience for chartered accountants. So that's where it's all at. It's all available on the Sustainability Hub. And if you wanted to reach out to me, my contact details, I think, in this presentation as well, Sue.
Indeed, you have some great points there, and I know actually if Chris, I think, clicks again, there's some more points that come up there, as I say, on the side of that slide, as well as I say, just basically on the work, as I say, start small, all these different, very, very good advice, and I think you've given us a great, for me anyway, initial overview of ESG matters. There's a lot of materials. I've briefly, as I say, just gone on to and flicked through some of the materials there on the Sustainability Hub and so on. So I'd recommend to anybody to do that. And yeah, I see there's a lot of great events. I know there's a conference in June time, Sustainability Conference, but even for smaller bite chunk events where you're actually having webinars that are rolling out over the coming weeks and months during the springtime as well. So you'll be getting emails from the Institute, I'm sure, on these. I would recommend to anyone to check them out live. I know there'll probably be recordings of them as well, just to build up your knowledge, because this is something that impacts us all at a global, at a national, and also in our work going forward. So we need to be on top of this. And there will even be client questions and different things over the coming years on this. So just to build up even a basic level of knowledge at first is very good. Susan, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you for joining us this morning. I know we'll have questions coming in as well, and that you'll be with us until the end at 11:15 as well. So if you have any questions, do ask Susan on the Q&A and on the chat. And as you say, you have your contact details and that initial slide in your pack. And I know Chris was very good there as well. He included the slides. So if you didn't get them by email, they're included in the chat function as well. So you can click in there. He would have included them about half an hour ago, and please download them and you get all those links that Susan was talking about. Thanks again for that session, and that all it leaves me to do is to just hand back to Conal. I know yourself and Eamonn are going to have a good chat now. I suppose looking ahead to 2022, you might mention sustainability, who knows as well, but listen, over to you.
Absolutely, thank you very much, Jeremy. I was just warning first of all that my computer, parts of my computer still think it's 2080, so it might decide at any given point that I've passed my sell-by date and shut me down. So you might just stay on standby there in case.
I will, Conal. I won't go for a cup of tea or for a jog. You're okay.
Very good. Now we're delighted to welcome at this stage Eamonn Healy back on to Practice News. Eamonn, it's great to have you. You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Eamonn is a practitioner of some years standing in Fairview in Dublin, where he is Leahy O'Riordan. He's with his partner Owen O'Riordan. They've got actually two offices, main office in Fairview and a branch office in Rathfarnham. So Eamonn, there's two things to talk about this morning. First of all, the going into practice course, which you're going to be helping us with, which is coming up in March. But also, you know, just in terms of some of the things and the themes that would be exercising your mind going now as we look out into 2022. What would be the main headings that you would see that accountants need to be thinking about now?
Well, I think accountants in practice, the big problem that we all have is staff. Getting staff is difficult, and getting good staff is very difficult. And I think the hybrid working model has allowed us to do two things. It has allowed us to retain staff longer than we might otherwise do, because the most common reason staff leave us is they get a job with a better commute, and not necessarily on better money, but in a better commute. And the second reason is that by having a good hybrid policy in place, or having as good a hybrid policy as we can in place, it allows us to attract staff from other employers who aren't offering the same hybrid issues that we're offering, the same hybrid benefits that we're offering. What we found in relation to hybrid working, it was foisted upon us, of course, in March 2020. But what we found with the hybrid working is that the qualified staff and the experienced staff are most suited for hybrid working, whereas students and admin staff and receptionists, they have to attend every day. So we asked those experienced and qualified members of staff who are hybrid working to attend at least one day a week, and they may attend a second day if they wish. That means that we know that Tom is in on Monday, Dick is in the Tuesday, Harry's in the Wednesday. We have that kind of anchor points in the week for those individuals, and then the others come and go as the work necessitates. One of the things that we found is that over the years, we've heard people saying to us, you should try and build a good culture in your practice. And one of the issues around culture, one of the great drivers of culture and positive culture is trust. Trusting your staff and having them trust you. So you trust them to work at home, you trust them to come in when they're going to come in, and that they need to do what they want to do. And more often than not, by far majority of occasions, that trust is well placed. but that's what builds culture. And if you can have a good culture in a firm, if you can have a good culture in a practice, you're more likely to have a settled staff and less likely to have a staff that's ebbing and flowing. And if you can remove the reason why people are leaving, which is the commute, then you're going to have them a little bit longer. You're going to save on issues like recruitment fees. You're going to have a better kind of corporate memory around the place. You're going to have a more stable experience for the client and for other staff members. So hybrid working is something that we all need to get right. What we did find was we did suggest to staff members that we would hot desk them when they came in, but that wasn't appealing to them. They still wanted to retain their desk. And that was a little bit odd, but it's very human, I suppose, at one level. So that's really the big issue is staffing and how it plugs into hybrid working.
Absolutely. That's a very interesting topic, and we may circle back to that again in a couple of minutes, because I want to get on to sort of the time band issue that we want to talk about just now. So Chris, if you just move on to the next slide there, please. I just want to draw people's attention to the Going Into Practice Day, which is coming up on the 25th of March 2022. So many of you will have attended this over the years. It's every member who goes into practice, either practice by themselves or as a partner in practice, is obliged to attend the Going to Practice Day a year before or a year after getting their practicing cert. So it's an obligation, but it's, you know, the objectives of the Going to Practice Day. If you just move on one more slide there, Chris. Is look, I mean, it's to give you a how-to guide, how to actually go into practice, if that's what's in front of you, to talk about the business of practice regulation. Obviously, it's a fairly regulated area. We always have a practitioner to share their story, and for a number of years it's been Eamonn now. We talked about PII. We have Martin Adams on from Arcus, and we talk about practice management and development. I say it's mandatory. But Eamonn, the first time that you helped us with this and gave the practitioner's perspective, the practitioner's story, was back in December 16, and we run it twice a year usually. So that means that you've done this 10 times for us, and this is coming up to the 11th time. So we really are indebted to you for this, as are the members who you've spoken to. So sort of by my calculations, that there've got to be about 400 people who have heard your story. I know over time you've nuanced the presentation that you gave, but I do recall at one of the times fairly early on, you entitled it "Things I Wish I Knew" before I went into practice, which I thought was very said it all for those who are just starting out. So, I mean, over time, obviously, you've nuanced your message, and so I'd ask you, your reflections, perhaps, on that journey over time, as you've revisited the message that you want to give to people going into practice.
Look, being in practice is difficult. What you have to remember is that practice is a commercial activity first and foremost. That commercial activity is delivering a professional service that requires us to meet professional standards, that requires us to deal with a cohort of people in the form of clients who have a wide understanding and comprehension of what we do, using staff who can be employed in this practice or any other practice. So it's very tricky. But what I have learned over the years is that the big thing I wish I'd been taught before, I wish I understood better before I went into practice, was the importance of soft skills. So if you can develop your soft skills and in a far more evolved way, what will happen then is that the numbers on the practice will turn out right. As accountants, we tend to focus on the numbers, and sometimes we begin our thought about the practice on the numbers. But it really is, if you deliver a good experience to a client, a good experience to an employee, and you deliver what they're looking for, then they will come back, they will pay the fee, they will pay the proper fee, they'll pay it promptly. So when you look around for assistance in relation to running practice, you find people sitting at your table who have their own interests at heart. So the institute will sit at the table and their interest is ensuring compliance. You have the revenue sitting at the table, and their interest is in ensuring collection of taxes. You have the CRO sitting at the table, and their interest is compliance with the Companies Act. They don't care about anything else. They only care about those issues, but the practitioner has to worry about everything. So if the practitioner can find out what the client wants and give it to them, then the practice will grow and prosper. That's in short, that's the story we have to understand. So it's a matter of knowing how to find out what the client wants. It's a matter of recognizing it when we do discover it. It's a matter of delivering it in a cost-efficient way. And we're in the business of being accountants, and it's a business at the end of the day. So if we get the soft skills right, the numbers will turn out right at the end of the day. So things like negotiation skills, we have to learn and develop those kind of skills. Things like marketing, things like client experience, things like understanding these issues. They're all very important. I mean, I've said till I'm blue in the face. Clients don't judge us as accountants by what we do, which is what we're trained to do. They judge us by what they understand. So clients understand prompt service. They understand access to the accountant. They understand a piece of information being delivered to them in a form that they understand, the communications. So if you're the kind of practitioner who's going to be late, or if you're dealing with your clients, if you're the kind of practitioner who's going to be sort of very technical in the way that they describe what needs to be done, your practice isn't going to prosper. Even though you might be the most compliant practice in the world and have the highest technical standards, you will wonder why your practice isn't growing. And that's the reason it's not growing. It's because the client doesn't sign up to it. So you have to get on board with the client, find out what they want, and give it to them in a cost-efficient way. That's the long and short of it. There's no greater history than that. Just focus on the client, deliver a quality service in the form the client wants. The client is never going to say to you, that was a beautiful audit report. It's just never going to happen. So what you've got to do is you've got to make sure that what they're judging you by is what you're delivering to them. And sometimes the clients judge you by strange things. They judge you by how old the magazines are in the reception. They'll judge you by how chipped the cup is that you offer them coffee in. They'll judge by the quality of the coffee. These are stupid, unfair measurements, but they're applied.
It's the non-verbals. And Eamonn, this message that you've given over time, in the various ways you've given it, it's always landed very effectively with the people who attend the course, because we do look at the course assessments afterwards. People complete these, and your presentation has always been front and center what people talk about afterwards, what they tell us about. So I mean, I'd certainly encourage people, if you are one of the 400 people who has heard Eamonn's presentation over the years and has gone into practice, by all means give us your reflections on that now as to what you heard then, how you applied that, and so forth. So we'd be certainly very interested to hear from that. If I might say, one of the things which you've often dealt with, and you've talked about cost effective there, is dealing with the client who comes to you and says, look, I can get that done cheaper. There's an unqualified person up the road who'll do the job cheaper. So, please reduce your fee. And certainly you've talked a fair bit about that over the years. And I don't know if that's a message you'd like to share again.
Yeah. So what I said to you is clients will judge you not by what you do, but what they understand. Clients understand fees. And fees is a good topic for a client to begin a conversation on, because it's measurable. I mean, are you going to charge 2,200 or 2,500 for the service? But what you have to do is you have to bring the client away from that narrow conversation. And the way we generally do it is we say, look, there are about 1,500 firms of chartered accountants in the country. One of those firms is the cheapest. The other 499 are more expensive. We're one of the 1,499 that are more expensive than the cheapest person. If we know by our own clients that our fees are about midpoint, and we make that point to them, we know that when clients leave us, the most common reason for leave us is not to do with fees. And if we were had a gouging approach to fees, clients would be leaving us more often for that. And that's not why they leave us. They leave us because they go out of business. They leave it because they retire. They leave it because they sell their business. They leave it because their nephew becomes an accountant that has opened up in practice. They leave us, they're the kind of reasons they leave us for. So we know we're not losing clients for fees. So we know that the fee we're charging you is not a fee that's driving people out. And really what you've got to look at as a client is you've got to look at the risk of going for the lowest fee. If you go for the lowest fee, you're going to go for the lowest service. And we're living in a world where the compliance people, the revenue, the CRO, the RBO, all those kind of people, they're all increasingly more computerized and digitized, and their enforcement is getting better and better. And there's more automation of fines and penalties going on in the world, and there's less and less involvement of human activity when it comes to a fine being struck. It's struck by the machine, and the machine in charge. And you really want a practitioner who's going to be ahead of time and deliver your compliance material to the authorities of concern on time and in full correctly. If you go to the cheapest person, they're probably underfunded and under-resourced. They're maybe unable every time to meet those deadlines. You're going to expose yourself to a greater risk of missing a deadline, and you're going to expose yourself to a greater risk of reputational damage by being associated as being a non-compliant person, when you as an individual may be inherently aspire towards compliance. So what we would say to you is, look, come and test our services for a year. If you're not happy with them after a year, we'll sit down and discuss it again. And if you want to take on board some of the services we're offering you in-house, we can certainly help you do that. But if you come aboard, that's our fee for the year. It's a fixed fee on the basis that you provide us with a fixed amount of information. So we're not going to come along and give you a shock uplift on the fee later on. And we'll talk about it again in 12 months' time. So what I'm doing there in that case is I'm pointing out to the client the importance of having a quality provider of a service who is well resourced. The importance of the clients that when they sign up to me, they're not signing up for life. They're only signing up for 12 months. I'm trying to make the risk as small as possible. I'm trying to highlight the risks of moving outside the opportunity. And I'm not talking about bringing my fee down to the level of the competitor's quote or even a midway point in relation to that. I'm saying to them, look, we know people who have left, and some of them have come back, and others have been a little embarrassed to come back. And if at the end of the day you decide to go with another provider, don't be embarrassed to come back in here. We'd be happy to have you back and take it from there. My favorite client is the client who comes from a practice who hasn't delivered a service, because then we look like a genius. The client who's never had a bad accountant in his life doesn't understand the magic that we do here in the same clear way that somebody who's had a poor experience.
Very good, Eamonn. That's very, very interesting, and it's a message that certainly landed with the attendees in the course over the years, and with all of us, I think. That's what we've got to be concentrating on. Time is against us now, Eamonn. We're pretty much out of time. So I just finally ask for one perspective on one item, which I think is very topical, and is the Scarp. I know you're involved in insolvency, and I know what's the typical business that you would see that's going to benefit from the Scarp process? Just if you identify the key aspects of it.
Yeah, look, we've done almost 600 liquidations here over the years, so we're kind of familiar with the liquidation process generally. And when we look at the Scarp process, and we've one of them emerging at the moment coming on board, not everybody is suitable for a Scarp. And a lot of candidates that might be considering the Scarp may be better off considering a pre-packed liquidation. But in relation to the Scarp, it is suitable for people who do have a strong plan of what is going to happen in the future, who do have a reliable set of books and records that they can rely on. I mean, if the underlying information is weak or fragile, it's unlikely to stand up to the robust scrutiny that Scarp is going to be subjected to. So if you can point out to the creditors that the Scarp process will bring them to a point that for most of them is a much better place than it would be were the company to be liquidated, then you can generally get that story over the line. That's my anticipation. But to do that, you're going to have to show that the proprietors of the business have taken some pain, that the proprietors of the business have entered in new fresh capital. The capital is more likely to come from the proprietors of business because the timescales in the Scarp are very short. So to get external capital within the timescale is generally, I think, is going to be quite a big ask. So if the proprietors of the company are seen to take some pain, if the proprietors of the company are seen to put in some more money, if the books and records of the company are robust enough to stand up to scrutiny, if there's a clear plan and well-founded assumptions going forward, then the Scarp has the best chance of surviving and prospering into the future. As everything, time will tell.
Thank you very much for that perspective, Eamonn. And I know this is one that's going to run and run, and we're going to be getting back to this not least next week when we've got a free seminar on the Scarp process. Eamonn, thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for your perspectives there. One of the pieces of feedback we've got come in here is Eamonn keeps the message simple, and personally it resonates well with me. So that's some perspective that's coming in from our people.
Thank you, Mother.
On the call today. So thank you very much for that. Certainly look forward to having you back on our Going to Practice Day on March 25th. And say thank you very much for those perspectives and for all the perspectives that you've shared with us over the years on that.
Thank you.
We'll be talking again, no doubt. And I'll have to pass you back now to Jeremy, who's going to finish up for us today.
Indeed. Well, we're going to go on for another few minutes. Hopefully most people I still see are with us, as I say to you. So give us another 5 minutes or so, and we're going to get back to questions and any outstanding questions and so on as well. Chris, if you can click ahead just to some of the other points we have in our slides here, just on the UK tax updates side of the house here. Of course, we have a lot of stories, and we've been through a very busy period, of course, as well now with the personal income tax filing January, and of course now with the easement of payments, an extra month given into the end of February as well. Practice Matters actually covers that in detail on pages 5 and 6. So do download it. It gives 2 more details in relation to the precise details around the filing, easement payments, and how it all works and so on. So do read that. I'm sure most of you are well familiar with it at this stage. Of course, we have our Institute Tax newsletter every Monday. Make sure you're signed up for that. Now, there has been a number of consultations, both ongoing and that'll be coming up in the next few weeks as well. Our UK tax lead, Leoncha, has asked me to highlight to you one, which is around the current modernising the collection of UK tax debt consultation. We invite your actual feedback on this one, and if you click that link there, you'll learn a little bit more about the consultation by the 14th of February. So that's one that's quite important. Also, there's going to be another one here that has been extended by a month until the 22nd of March on the call for evidence on income tax self-assessment registration for self-employed and landlords, obviously concerning quite a large cohort of clients that any SMP has. Leoncha, as I say, will be taking feedback on that as well. You can learn a bit more about that call. I'm glad to say that Leoncha will be actually joining us on our next Practice News webinar and going forward from April to give an update, specifically for 10-15 minutes on Northern Ireland tax issues as well. So one to look out for. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, do drop Leoncha a line. She'll be happy to come back to you if there's a specific issue in interactions with HMRC or whoever it may be as well. That's one thing before we go back to our panelists. The next thing is just to give you a quick update on some of our upcoming courses. And Chris, if you can click ahead again to 1 slide on and 2 slides on, actually. Conal, you mentioned, and I mentioned earlier as well, that free Scarp webinar with our professional accounting colleagues, but also with David Swinburne and Sinead McNamara of Fitzgerald Legal. Really looking forward to that, giving a bit more practical details on the next Thursday, the 10th of February. Do book in if you can. Taking your practice to the next level is a workshop we have, which is actually coming up. I'm sure many of you here on the call have been on something like this before with us. We have 2 speakers this time, 2 practitioners sharing their stories about how they've grown their practice. Sean O'Rourke and Colm Killarney and Cork, and also Gary McAleen, who is also a colleague on the Members of Practice Committee for Eamonn of Quarter Accountants in Belfast. So definitely do. Limited numbers, getting great interaction so far and great bookings on that one on Thursday the 17th of February on the morning. And we've other various courses on technical side of things coming up, as you can see as well, into March time. You can click in any one of the links there and you learn more about those. Listen, before we wrap up here, I'm just going to go back to our panelists, and I'm going to return firstly to Crona. And Crona, I think you've been busy on the keyboard there answering some questions, if you can hear us.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I hope I've got back to everybody's questions.
Was there any repeated themes that you're actually seeing there, or anything to highlight to people?
Yeah, so I suppose it's really revenue response times. It's been quite a common theme, and I know from speaking to members over the last couple of weeks that's really an issue. So I suppose just to say we are meeting revenue the week after next in terms of my inquiries, and like I suppose revenue have a perception that their response times are excellent, and they'll be able to show us statistics showing that 90% of queries are answered within the required time. But I suppose the problem is for the other 10%, and what we're finding, I guess, is the more complex queries get pushed to the bottom of the pile. And now I know I'm aware that there are some more straightforward queries that should be answered straight away, but don't seem to be. So we will highlight that to revenue. It's a common theme. The other, I suppose, theme that I suppose has come out over the last few weeks as well, and not necessarily linked to the questions here, but we've had instances of practitioners having to highlight to revenue their own guidance. So that's not ideal. So we have raised it with revenue before about making sure they're trained, their staff are adequately trained to answer queries. And I suppose that links back to my comments on the new revenue code of practice for audit. So that's why we're very keen that officials are, I suppose, adequately trained. Now, I know we can't catch everybody and there will always be instances, but we're very conscious that time is poor, and you know, we don't want the idea of practitioners being on the phone, or I mean, I'm sure you'd like to be on the phone, but even on my inquiries and emails back and forth, it's very frustrating, it's very time consuming, and obviously it's a lot of this is unpaid work as well. So we're very, very conscious of that, and we will continue. And I know Nora did a tremendous job last year in raising this with revenue, and we will just continue to do that. So
of course, if anybody has any particular queries, say to you, you mightn't be able to assist on all occasions, but they have your contact details there in the tax team, as well as I say to you. Susan, thanks for that, Crona, and thanks for that summary. Susan, just coming back to yourself, I know we've seen, I suppose, some good comments and questions here just on the sustainability. I suppose one thing here, and I think you summarized it very well there, and people are asking us to say, you know, how do I learn more about it? And I think you've given them the resources there, and people, there's one or two comments saying, look, we're time poor in this regard, but I think it's really the webinars and so on you've come up on this allow you to actually do it in a bite chunk way in 15, 20 minutes. You don't have to spend half a day coming to a sustainability webinar. You have something to suit all time frames.
Absolutely, and I completely appreciate that people are out the door busy and they don't have time to kind of suddenly focus on this. So the advice is there, very much go on to the resources centre, and don't be shy about getting in touch. And so we can kind of certainly tailor some tips to people's particular requirements. And it's just funny about one of Eamonn's points. I remember that he said that you know, people don't differentiate between practices necessarily, and they also understand what they understand. So this is another way of differentiating potentially, is by showing people what they understand themselves. So that was the second time I've heard Eamonn's presentation, and I enjoyed it just as much the second time. So thank you again, Eamon.
Susan, that's a very good point to actually make. And listen, as I say, this is a team we're going to be building our support and guidance, evolving all the time in the coming months and years. So this is very much the start for, like myself, for many, many people on the call here today. But there will be further, as I say, easy to use guidance to build your knowledge in this area. So Susan, thanks for taking the time to join with us this morning on that one. Cornel, back to yourself. I know we've had a few questions coming in there. Some of them, as I say to you, are such questions as, have we any plans to update the audit exempt work programs? I think that work program goes back to 2018. We do indeed. Yes. So we'll keep you appraised on that one, as I say to you. Mary has asked us any examples on recording your CPD for RIs. If you actually go into the professional standards section of the website, and I think it might be linked into our new practice pages as well, there's some good documents of how to record all your CPD, Excel spreadsheet, everything there. And it doesn't have to be anything complex, Mary. It's just keeping records of that you went to a 3-hour webinar, or you attended a 1-hour course, or whatever you did. It's just to show you've done Irish or UK specific audit training. So it doesn't need to be that you're going into and listing what you did and so on as well. Just keeping it in an Excel spreadsheet, and there are records there on the professional standards CPD section of the website. And as I say to you there, so don't worry about that. Cornel, have you seen any other ones there that kind of caught your eye of the questions that have come in, as I say?
Well, just not forgetting that if you're an audit RI, there's going to be all these new requirements. So there's
I did highlight that as well, that IAFSA have their new requirements. Even you have to do specific Irish and UK training if you're registered in both jurisdictions, but you still you record it still in the same way as you would have. So they were looking for guidance on documenting the assessment of CPD. So recording it in an Excel spreadsheet, recording it on the guidance there. You have to do this guidance, and you have to say show that you're trained for both jurisdictions, but you still record it in the same way. So Cornel, you were saying there might be a couple more things.
Absolutely, yes, and what we'll certainly do is we'll certainly keep updating the website according as people are asking us. So just ask Chris maybe just to record those points, and we'll make sure that we can get them in there into the website so that people can find them easily. someone wants to be linked to the Scarp webinar. Yes, we do. It's in the slides there.
If you go back to that page there, as I say to you, just I spoke about in the technical news, you see a link there to that webinar, so you'll find it in your PDFs.
Absolutely, and there is, and we are going to update the PQAs also. That's to take account of those things that Jeremy was just talking about there in his presentation. So that's on the way also for any of the license holders. Finally, one person asking us protecting the word accountant. Yes, that is on our list of things to keep pushing with government. They do push back very hard. They are not interested in doing it, but we do keep pressing. So yes, that's going on in the background. Guys, I think we're out of time. I would certainly, I think we need to draw it to a close.
You do.
I'd like to say thank you very, very much to our panelists for the really interesting perspectives that they've given us and for sharing their knowledge and wisdom with us. So thanks very much, guys. And I know we're going to be coming back to all of these things in the future, and welcome on board, Krona, in terms of helping us out with the tax. Thank you, Jeremy, for putting it all together, and indeed for stepping in at the last moment there to do all the introductions as well.
Thank you, Cole. Glad that you made it back in time, as I say to you, and also not to forget always the guys in the background, our CPD team, basically helping us out there. They always are a vital part. So to thank Linda, to thank Chris, to thank Emma, Nicole, everybody else in the CPD. I'm sure I've left a name or two out as well. And also my own colleagues, of course, Bernie and so on, and Jenny with emails and marketing. So thanks to everyone who's helped us out in this. And most of all, thanks for you guys this morning to attend with us. I say we still have a good number of people on board, so thanks for taking the time. And you know where to find us in Practice Consulting if you wish to talk with us in the meantime. As I say, we have a whole list of webinars coming up, and we'll be back with our next practice news, I think, on the 8th of April.
Until then, look after yourself. Cheers now.